I understand why people hate religion. I really do. At its worst, religion becomes an excuse to cloak violence in a shroud of righteousness. We see it with abusive priests and rabbis and imams who exploit the power of their station to harm the vulnerable who trust them. We see it with governments and politicians who veil themselves with religious piety to serve their pursuit of power. And we see it with extremists who kill to make the world align with their religious understanding. Now, of course, it's simplistic to blame the world's atrocities and ills on religion. Stalin and Mao certainly found a way to cause profound harm without invoking God. No. Most often, sophisticated arguments against religion don't accuse it of being the source of all evil. They simply think it irrelevant, benign, a shared language for weddings and funerals, comfort and celebration. They treat religion as quaint. And religion is guilty of marginalizing itself. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, it's customary to blame anti-religious philosophy for the eclipse of religion in modern society. It would be more accurate and more honest to blame religion for its own defeats. Religion declined not because it was refuted, but because it became irrelevant, dull, oppressive. On Rosh Hashanah, I asked us to think about what it is that religion still has to offer us in light of these issues. Why choose to be religious in a world that no longer compels it, in a world where religion is just as often the source of harm as it is the source of good? And I offered an answer from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs for us as individuals, that religion pushes us to think in a framework of responsibilities, not of rights, of what we owe to the world, not what the world owes to us. But we only partially answered the question of why bother with religion. Today, we're going to take on the harder issue. What does religion have not just to offer us as individuals, but to society as a whole? Now, I know that some would contest that this sanctuary should be a spiritual haven from the outside world. Otherwise, it risks being tainted by it. And it's an argument that I have heard from those who fear that this will become just another polarized space in society. The one place that you come for comfort and uplift, degraded by partisan rancor. I understand that fear. Yet even those among us with a desire to separate religion from politics can cite examples of unjustifiable inaction of religious institutions in the face of evil. Would any of us defend the Catholic Church's complicit silence during the Holocaust? The Church doesn't even defend itself. It has owned its moral failure and apologized. Now, there may be 1,000 opinions in this room about where exactly to draw the line. But I would imagine that we all agree that some values are so core that we cannot imagine a religious community with integrity that would choose not to act when those values come under attack. So I want to share with you 2 stories about religion in public space, to use them to help us to determine parameters for what it is that religion has to offer society and how. Story number 1. I grew up learning the history of a larger-than-life rabbi who served my home congregation before I was born, Rabbi Samuel S. Meyerberg of Temple B'nai Yehuda in Kansas City. I heard from our clergy about how he railed against Tom Pendergast, the corrupt Democratic Party boss. The Pendergast machine had a stranglehold on local politics. Everything from elections to government contracts to gambling rings. And Rabbi Meyerberg was the first to publicly condemn Pendergast. He had a steady stream of speeches that grabbed headlines in the Kansas City Star, and it came at great personal cost. He survived an assassination attempt when 4 men opened fire on his vehicle. The leadership of his community not only did not back him, they urged him to stop his campaign. But he persisted, and Pendergast was taken down. Fascinated with this story as a teen, I researched more only to discover that what I learned in religious school wasn't entirely accurate. Pendergast's hold on power did not end with a fiery moral takedown. It ended with a conviction for anybody? Tax evasion. A legal technicality landed him in jail, not the rabbi. Story number 2. During the Holocaust, the small town of Le Chambon in occupied France rescued 3,500 Jews from Nazis and their collaborators under the Vichy government. Le Chambon has unusual roots, the Christian Science Monitor notes. Most locals are Huguenot descendants, Protestants driven out from Catholic Spain in the 17th century. They're deeply devout. They study their scriptures daily. They have a sense of identification with the persecuted children of Israel. They developed powerful narratives around their scripture. So more than a dozen pastors and their communities built a sophisticated network to help hide these Holocaust refugees among them. And what made this story unique from the other righteous Gentile stories of the era was the fact that it was the majority of the population. Their faith was so ingrained in their consciousness that it didn't even feel like a choice to act. It was normal for us to help, they said. We've helped all the time in the past. This is who we are. 2 stories about religion and politics, about religion interacting with the world. Rabbi Samuel Meyerberg taking on the Pendergast machine alone, and the Huguenots of Le Chambon saving refugees in the Holocaust as a community. So what's the difference? Both are noble, but only one made an impact. The one with the community coming together around their values. The book of Genesis tells us why it is that religion was invented, why God forged a partnership with Abraham to create the first formal religion in the Torah, saying, "I have chosen Abraham so that he will direct his children and his place of dwelling to keep the way of God, la'atzot tzedek u'mishpat, to do what is just and what is right." That's why religion exists, to do what is just and what is right. And that's what Abraham did. When the city of Sodom was on the brink of destruction because of its immorality, he refused to relinquish hope for its salvation. He argued with God to attempt to save it for the sake of 10 righteous souls. And we make such a big deal about Abraham arguing with God over Sodom. We use it to highlight Abraham's chutzpah, the strength of his moral compass. But ultimately, what we don't talk about, the fact that Abraham failed. For all of his arguing and doing what was right and what was just, Sodom was destroyed. When we look closer at that verse in Genesis about why religion was created, It's clear that Abraham only internalized part of the charge. I have chosen Abraham, God says, so that he will direct his children and his place of dwelling to keep the way of God by doing what is just and what is right. Abraham did what was just and what was right. But he did not engage his family and his community as part of that. This was, in fact, his fatal flaw throughout life, acting alone. Abraham was more like Rabbi Meyerberg than he was like the Huguenots of Le Chambon, a lonely man of faith, noble, but ineffective. One person cannot save a society. It's like trying to stop a flood with a single sandbag. When the waters of hatred and indifference and corruption well up in a society, a single sandbag will not suffice. You need the collective deployed as a unified barrier to hold the water back, to create a moral levee. When I spoke on Rosh Hashanah about how religion is one of the few institutions that gets us to think in the language of responsibility, I only shared half the equation. Only when those values of responsibility are lived out in community does religion have the power to shape society for good. Religion is communal. Our sense of right and wrong leads us to connect with other human beings and form partnerships for moral ends, says Rabbi Seth Limmer. Religion is uniquely situated not just to infuse us with values, but to collectively channel them into action. And that is what religion can give to society. Now, of course, you and I know that for every resident of Le Chambon, every Rabbi Meyerberg acting in good faith, you can find a Father Coughlin acting in bad. The pro-fascism, Nazi-sympathizing priest who spouted anti-Semitic sermons over American airwaves throughout the 1930s. He inspired months of nationwide isolationist protests leading up to World War II, with signs and chants of "Send Jews back where they came from" in leaky boats. The danger of opening up the public space for good religion is that it also opens up the public space for bad religion. Religion, after all, is a ready-made tool that drives shared belief and values and action. A tool that can be used to abolish slavery or organize ISIS. So how do we protect against bad religion? And how do we even know for sure what bad religion looks like? Well, today on Yom Kippur, we get a powerful answer. On a day where we're supposed to be obsessed with ritual detail and personal purification, the prophet Isaiah yanks us out of our prayers and yells at us, "Is this the fast I want? To starve your bodies lying there in sackcloth and ashes? You call that a fast?" No. This is the fast I desire. To let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. It is to share your bread with the hungry and to take the wretched poor into your home. Isaiah tells us what bad religion looks like. You think your prayers and your personal confessions are the purpose of this day? Your salvation? Your purpose here is to affirm your collective responsibility to society. If we choose to engage the power of religion for good, we must be vigilant for, number one, when religion serves only to reinforce itself, and number two, for when the religious put themselves above others. Bad religion is not when people disagree with you. It's when we use tradition to create a hierarchy with ourselves at the top. We possess all of the religious tools that we need to call out and disarm bad religion. But to use them, we have to make the decision to be in the fight. If we choose to give up on religiosity because it has been misused, we relinquish our ability to hold religion accountable to its own ideals. We can only save religion from itself and use it to help society when we are on the inside. So, what is it that we have established for religion in the public space? Responsibility over rights, that it has the power to move the collective, not just the individual, and that we can fight bad religion with good religion by not walking away and by not putting ourselves in the center. What we have yet to establish is what to do when we disagree. How do you reach collective action when your own community has a full spectrum of political affiliation, when we do not all agree on party or policy? No one should seek to impose his or her religious convictions on society, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs proclaims. But we should seek to bring the insights of our respective faiths to the public conversation about the principles for which we stand and the values that we share. I know that you have heard sermons from this bema that have frustrated you, that you have disagreed with, that you feel like have invaded your holy space. And when that happens, I hope that you know it is not the intention of your clergy to alienate you. It is our job to comfort you. But it is also our job to make you uncomfortable, to push this community to think about the challenges that are outside these walls and how we can do better in facing them together, to ask us to face and embrace our collective responsibility of trying to discern what is just and what is right. In this community, there will be disagreement about how to live out those values. And not only is that okay, that's the heart of the tradition that we have inherited. But we do ourselves and our tradition a disservice when our first impulse in disagreement is to reject the other person, not just their conclusion. We are better served in using Rabbi Sachs's frame and asking our fellow congregant, what values inform your position? We are better served when we begin with the presumption that every other person here is trying to discern what is just and what is right, and that our disagreement can be a catalyst for strengthening all of our moral thinking. We will not be able to bridge every difference, but as a small town mayor once said, people will accept variation in values as long as they think that you are driven by values. We're also more likely to identify the things we have in common when we start with our values, not our parties, especially here in this religious community where we have the benefit of a shared tradition and shared history to draw upon. Society has yet to develop a tool to inspire and enact our collective conscience that is as robust and as effective and efficient as religion. The fusion of community and values and purpose and accountability have yet to be replicated. But like any powerful technology, we must take care in how we use it. Those of us who identify as religious in the 21st century, imperfect and flawed as we and our traditions may be, our identification is an act of faith. That society can be better, that we choose our collective responsibility of moral stewardship for society. So let's embrace that. Let's hope to be like the Huguenots, caught in a conspiracy of good with each other. Let's engage with each other to bring good into this world. And when we're asked why, I hope that our response will be exactly the same as the Huguenots, because this is who we are. Gemar Chatima Tova.